This idea of discipline, always quite a loose term in the Tory party for the last couple of years, has really been chucked out the window and it's fallen off a cliff.
I mean, I guess there may also be a reason why another reason why Rishi Sunak's reluctant to hand over 10 quid that his party could find any number of uses for if they haven't already spent it. And that is, hand that money back on the basis of disapproval with the racist remarks as they have been described by the Prime Minister. Now, that's officially the line, but you hand over or block future checks, it's open season on donors. I mean, there are any number of other donors, aren't there? Some of them big businessmen, medium-sized businessmen. Their money is very important, and they've all got histories. They've all got social media accounts. They all say things in workplace meetings, as in the case of Frank Hester, and that stuff can come out. And you take that kind of action, and it's going to be the hunt for the next one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it certainly, rightfully or wrongfully, will put people off donating if they think that their own kind of pronouncements and comments will be combed through a bit like a politician's would. I think that's probably just an inevitability. Doesn't mean that it's not right to report them when they emerge or indeed to look at that. But I think that's the argument Kemi's making, right? Donating to a political party, even if it's a big check, is different to running for a political party or even being prominent in a political party. Now, that might cut the mustard with you or not as a voting member of the public. That's fair enough. But that's the argument she's making. And would it open a can of worms? Well, yeah, it would.
John?
I think that when we're talking about such big sums, though, we aren't talking about £2,000 or even £100,000 at some Tory auction or something. We are talking about £10 million in a year, which will make up a significant amount of money. And these comments aren't just, something a bit not nice. I know that Frank Hester said, he'd been a bit rude, but it wasn't just a bit rude. It was way beyond that. I think that the bar here of what he has said is so high that I think you'll struggle to find other political donors who are going to fall into the same kind of level of saying such thing. And I mean, maybe they are out there and other journalists haven't managed to track down their comments yet. I just don't think that
That's fair.
there are many cases like this out there.
Yeah, you may be right, except it doesn't take many. You don't need many. You know, once the door's been opened, then the next story is always easier to land, isn't it? And can still cause a bit of embarrassment. I just raised the possibility that may be on the Prime Minister's mind. What may well be on his mind is the mood among those Tory MPs today, to have the Scottish Conservative group come out and say, look, we need to look again at this donation from Frank Hester, and to suggest that maybe that donation should be considered for being handed back. That's openly, publicly, a group of Conservative MPs. That was a moment too, wasn't it? And you wonder, in your conversations, with MPs around the place at Westminster, how many others, as it were, more privately, take exactly the same view, Kate?
I think the interesting thing, which speaks to the broader point about Rishi at the moment, is that this idea of discipline, always quite a loose term in the Tory party for the last couple of years, has really been chucked out the window and it's fallen off a cliff, to mix my metaphors, the past few days. This discipline is just fraying everywhere. So I work Saturdays because I work for a Sunday paper, and on Saturday we have a joint op-ed from two ministers, senior ministers, one in the cabinet, saying we need more defence spending 2 days after the budget. It's pretty astonishing stuff. And then we've got the Scottish Tory group breaking ranks, talking about the donation row. We've got people on Twitter starting rows with other Tory MPs, saying this, that and the other. So it's kind of totally unravelling. You speak to some Conservative MPs and they will say it's starting to feel a bit like end of days, a bit like those end of Boris days.
Is that, do you think, Kate, a product of the Prime Minister's hemorrhaging authority, or is it just a party which is looking down the barrel of dreadful opinion poll ratings months from an election and would be happening whoever was the boss?
It's both, isn't it? Because if you get one, you get the other. So I think Rishi's always struggled with that authority thing, partly because he didn't win his own general election. But when you're staring at a poll, you're lagging behind in the polls, 20, 25 points to Labour, discipline is going to really start going out the window. The big question here, we obviously had Lee's defection on Monday to reform. Are other people going to follow him out the door? I'm sure you've talked about that already this week. But the big question here is, does that kind of signify the end? Is there Lee's defection? Are there bad May elections? And then do we see a move against Rishi? Or is it, look, guys, it's too late now. You'll have to stick with him. Too late to twist.
Yeah, well, go on.
Well, I think on the authority point, you're absolutely right, Kate. And I think that part of it is some of the characters we've seen who have broken ranks in the last few days. Kemi Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat. These are the sort of names of people you expect to run if there is a Tory leadership contest. And so why would you want to do something like write an article about defence spending on LinkedIn on a Friday night? You might want to do that if you want to start positioning yourself for the leadership. And the difficult thing for Rishi Sunak is, once some people start doing that, how do you get authority back?
It's like a firing gun. It's like a starting
Exactly,
gun.
because let's see in the next couple of weeks before I'm next here, whether suddenly we see Penny Mordaunt suddenly come up with some other way that she can show, I don't know, we're going down weird metaphors, but some way she can show what she thinks, some way she can show her leadership. Maybe we'll get Suella back saying something. Once you've lost authority and people are just playing this leadership game, it's impossible to get that back again.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Montgomery, your fellow Pienaar and Friends friend, he was here yesterday, as I say, and he was saying he thought Rishi Sunak was going to be gone by election time. And it wasn't on the basis of what he wanted to see, because I know, and we know, Tim is no great fan of Rishi Sunak. He was saying it's what he's detecting and picking up clearly from his conversations, a change in the mood. Now, with your sort of, as it were, reporting hat on, as well as your commentator hat, are you picking up the same sort of thing, or are you not?
There is a change in the mood. I think you can pick that up. And I think that, like it or not, you're getting to these crunch weeks where if they're going to move against him, where are we now? Mid-March. It's going to have to be sooner than later. So you were always going to start having a lot of this soul-searching among MPs. Is May the key date? What's the significance of Lee? Is Lee a man that defected because he was basically whipless and would remain whipless and wanted to run again? Or does this signify kind of the big realignment going somewhere else that they're also worried about? If I had to put money on it, I think Rishi will lead them into the next election, because I just don't think there's the time to do what they want to do. The people that want to get rid of him, to have that row, to have that contest, to have an election, and for not to have forced your hand, for the public to not say, look, this is ridiculous, fourth leader in one term, you've got to go to the polls right now. I just cannot see how that plays out. But are there people in the Conservative Party, that's in their power, not mine, who are currently thinking about that? Well, yes, there are.
Yeah, I mean, 3 weeks ago or so in this studio, there was talk about a little plot going on, bubbling away. They had a little headquarters somewhere near Westminster. It included a little kebab of ex-Downing Street aides. They had, who was involved in that? David Frost was reportedly involved in this whole
Walked
thing.
outside the building. And, somewhere. I mean, there is that thing on the side.
But that seems to have subsided until now, where it's bubbled up again.
But you speak to Tory MPs, and Tory MPs can see the polls. They're obviously worried about their jobs. I can't remember speaking to any Tory MP recently who was claiming, oh, it's all going well and Rishi Sunak's great. They can all see the problems. But what is the alternative at this point, as Kate says? Fine, you could get in someone else, but I think that Tory MPs realise they would look like a joke if they moved on to their fourth PM again. That doesn't look like a serious party. That doesn't look like stability. That looks like chaos. You don't really have time to sell a new leader to the country. I mean, people have heard of Suella Braverman, Kemi Badenoch, whoever, Penny Mordaunt, but they don't really know them as a leader. They haven't really been tested. And also, what's in it for those people as well? Why, if you were Penny, Kemi, Suella, whoever else, why would you want to take over now? Do you realistically think if you came in, you could put in some policies which are going to dramatically change the dial and keep you in Downing Street? Or would you much rather Rishi Sunak be the one who takes you into the election, let the result be whatever the result is, and then swoop in as the kind of heroic next leader of the Tory party, rather than have this next election on your hands?
Yeah, well, that seems to be the strongest argument of all. And if there is a serious move, it would probably have to do with making the Tory MPs behind the move just feel better about themselves. Just at the moment they feel helpless and doomed, and at least doing something is better than doing nothing.
What's the character in Dad's Army? We're all doomed.
Don't panic.
Don't panic. We're all doomed.
There's plenty of those on the Tory backbenches.
It's funny that you do hear a lot of this chatter from the backbenchers. You don't necessarily really hear it from the from the people who would have to run against Rishi, right?
No,
They're positioning for next time, but you don't really get the sense that they're chomping at the bit for now.
yeah, and that's what the idea of a May election. They've only got a few days, a very few days, before they can call it. After that, it's going to be too late anyway.
Exactly. I think I have to do the maths. I think I did the maths wrong
26th of
originally.
Ma- 26th of March.
The March.
It's 26th of March, but it's more likely to be the 25th because by the time you dissolve Parliament,
2
you know it
weeks.
does have to be all done in a day. So what's that next? Not Monday coming, the Monday
week.
afterwards. I mean, people have laughed about a May election for the last few weeks, but the last couple of days of things going disastrously wrong and people starting to talk again about do they oust Rishi Sunak and do they replace him with someone else has started, certainly the last couple of days, there has been increased talk in Westminster about that is an option that is still there. And number 10, I know they wouldn't wouldn't deny it, but they aren't denying a May option is still there on the table.
Right. This whole conversation is a little bit like Groundhog Day.
Kate doesn't think it's going to be a May election.
It's not going to be May. You heard. I can exclusively reveal I don't think it's going to be May.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go with that for the time being.